Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have just an amazing show coming right up. Our first guest is Bernadette Murphy, and she's here today to talk to us about her new book, Harley and Me, Embracing Risk on the Road to a More Authentic Life. Bernadette has served as a weekly book critic for the Los Angeles Times for over 6 years and is currently an associate professor of creative writing at Antioch University, Los Angeles. Her work has appeared in The Salon, The New York Observer, Miss Magazine, Climbing Magazine, the Los Angeles Times Magazine, Newsday, Literary Hub, and the San Francisco Chronicle. So let's welcome to the show, Bernadette.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Oh, it is such a pleasure to have you here. Your book is so inspiring and so very well written.
No, thank you so much.
Yes. So I've got to ask you, and it's kind of something I ask just about everyone I interview here. Like, what inspired you to, we'll start with even to get the motorcycle. What inspired you to do this would create this book?
It was so strange that this happened because I'm the last person on the planet that should have been on a motorcycle. I did not expect this of myself. I was working on a novel. I'm a writer. And my main character, I decided, wouldn't it be fun if she rode a motorcycle? So I signed up for a class at my local Harley dealer so that I could know what it felt like to be on a motorcycle so I could write about it. I thought I would just do this for the weekend. It was a weekend class, and that would be it. And it completely turned my life on its head because I fell in love with the motorcycle. I fell in love with risk-taking and adventure, and I discovered all kinds of things about myself that I had no idea about before I got on the motorcycle, and that's where the whole book came from because it looks at all the ways that risk and getting out of our comfort zone and doing things that are unfamiliar, how it expands our being, who we are, and makes our lives bigger.
Well, I have to applaud you because, I lived in California for many, many years, and learning to ride a motorcycle and then getting on the freeways in LA, that's a feat within itself. My goodness, it must have been so nerve-wracking just being able to, the first time you're out doing that.
It was, but I'll tell you the secret is to just make little tiny steps each way. So the first time I went on, it took me 2 or 3 months of riding before I'd get anywhere near a freeway. And then I'd get on the freeway for one exit and then get off, and then the next time I'd go 2 exits and then get off. And I just started building from there, and it got easier and more fun every step of the way.
Well, and being on a motorcycle is so exhilarating. There's such a great sense of freedom that comes with it. I've had boyfriends that have had motorcycles, but I've ridden quads in the desert out in Glamis. And so just being out there, it's just you and your bike, and it's so much fun.
It really is. And for me, what hooked me was taking that class. We were on a blacktop in LA working on figure 8 turns. And I found I could make this big, strong, heavy machine sort of ice dance. That's what it felt like. It was graceful and beautiful and brawny at the same time. When I could make it do that, it was like, oh, this feels so good. I want more.
The bug got you then, right?
Yeah, I was hooked. That was it.
Well, and you talk about, the bike itself. Your bike is any Harley is kind of a big bike, even the ones that are the smaller ones. And you're kind of a skinny mini. So, it took I'm sure some time to learn how to ride it.
It did. And the thing that I learned, and this is true about so many things I want to do in life, is I thought it would take all this sort of strong muscle on my part, but it didn't. What it took was some grace and balance. And once I had that, I didn't need the muscle. And so there's so many things in life, and that's what the whole book is really about. It isn't so much the motorcycle as it is all the things in life that we want to do that we're scared about doing because we think it's going to require something of us we don't have, to actually get out there and try it, because you might find out it takes a different set of skills, and you actually have those sets of skills.
Well, and so it kind of ties in, obviously, to your subtitle, Embracing Risk on the Road to a More Authentic Life. When people think of riding a motorcycle and authenticity, it may seem like it's not something that would even go together.
Good point. Good point. And I think also particularly for women, because I think that women motorcyclists generally fall into two categories. We have the sexy biker chick who's sitting on the back with a low-cut top and high heels. Or we have sort of the brawny dykes on bikes type of rider, and nothing in between. So the idea, what I found was when I started writing, people started making assumptions about me, and those assumptions were all wrong everywhere I turned. And that in order to really embrace what I was doing, I had to find my own authenticity in it and not parrot or copy what the society and what our culture gives me as the role models that I could choose from, but to develop my own path, as it were, to being a woman who's not very big, who is a professor. You know, I'm not like an edgy sort of, you know, who was living a very suburban life at that time, and yet I could also do this other thing as well. As long as I was coming at it from a place of authenticity, then it all came together.
I can see where there would be a lot of parallels, you know, in regards to that, just with stereotypes and, you know, women at work or just how we go about our daily lives. You know, because we're often have these labels that we are either given or we wear, and they're really nothing. It has absolutely nothing to do with the people that we are. Exactly.
And that's, you know, part of the joy of life is discovering who we are and sharing that with other people. And in order to do that, sometimes we have to get past those labels, whether we require the people who come into our lives to move past their presuppositions about us, or we have to move aside our presuppositions of others to start to get to know them better.
So when you went home and told your family, hey, guess what, I'm going to be riding a motorcycle, did they kind of look at you like, oh, boy?
Exactly. They thought I was having a midlife crisis, that you know, they better keep an eye on me. And I was living in this very suburban area of Los Angeles. That I knew people from the school. I was on the board of directors for my kids' K-8 school, and so I knew a lot of people in town. And then suddenly I'm showing up at different events, you know, wearing leather and with a motorcycle, and they're just looking at me like, oh boy, what's going on here? You know, that screw is loose, clearly. So having to fight that stereotype and decide, you know what, if this is a midlife crisis, it's of the best sort, the kind that asks us to stop in midlife and say, you know, who am I? Where am I going? Is this what I want? And how can I be as fully myself as possible?
I can imagine that gives your children just such a strong message in order for them to follow who it is that they are and not be, you know, and to really find out what they like and what they really enjoy in life.
It's been an amazing part of this journey is I didn't think about that side of it when all this was unfolding. And that actually has probably been the greatest benefit to me is watching them do amazing things. And I say, you know, how did you do that? That's great that you did that. And they'll say, well, Mom, you showed me how. And I had no idea that I was demonstrating for them how to do these things. For me, it was a matter of sort of saving myself. And I wasn't thinking about that, but it's been really cool to see how it's had a ripple effect on their lives.
Well, and when you talk about saving yourself, were you at a point where you're like, you know, this is just not me and I need some excitement in my life? And so, you know, this Harley's looking pretty good. It
was actually a point in my life where things were very painful. My mother had passed away many years earlier. My father was dying, and I was married, and the marriage was falling apart. And my two of my kids were in college. My youngest was in her last year of high school, and it felt like my life was completely going to break into pieces in a second. And then I found the motorcycle, and on the motorcycle I found that I had strength and courage and resilience and all these qualities that I had lost track of over all the years I had lived a very placid life. Now that I needed those qualities, I was finding them on the motorcycle. And that tapping into those qualities allowed me to make choices in my life that gave me a bigger, richer life as a result.
Well, and I think a lot of people can identify with that. You know, especially when you're parents and you have children. You're being the good person. You're being the good parent. You show up and you're the good employee, and you're doing all these things right, but might not necessarily feed your soul.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, where am I with all this?
Exactly. And, as women, it's even more a factor because we have hormones that turn us into nurturers during the childbearing years. Whether we have children or not, we're still producing this extra dose of estrogen. And that makes us be concerned about, the people around us, the people we work with, everyone, making sure everyone's taken care of all the time. And so my discovering the motorcycle happened at the time my estrogen level was starting to drop. And I was getting back to who I really was before that estrogen blanket made me into the super nurturer and able to find authentically who I was and what I wanted to do. And that was really very freeing and a lot of fun.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, every time I've been on again, I haven't ridden a motorcycle, but like a quad. Not a motorcycle by myself, but on a quad, it's just like, it's me and it's the sand dune and here we go.
Yeah. And you see things differently and you smell things differently and you encounter your environment in a way that's a little more visceral than being in a car, much less of a spectator and more part of the environment. And it feels really good.
Yeah, especially if you fall. At least I did that a few times.
I don't recommend that.
Hey, it's easier on sand and on concrete,
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough, and I don't recommend it either. And that's one thing, I kind of look back and I think to myself, during the times when I go on these rides, there's a lot of time, and it's really kind of an inside game in some ways because you're sitting there and the noise of the motorcycle, even if someone is trying to talk to you, there's no way you can hear them. And you're just kind of going along. What were some of the things that you were just like internally processing while you're taking these trips? Because you took some pretty long trips.
I took some very long trips, and it's funny. I did one across the country and back with my friend Emily. She's called Rebecca in the book, but her real name's Emily. And she would play music in her helmet while she rode, but I didn't because I like to just sort of be present in that moment. And as you know, doing anything hard like driving a quad, it takes so much attention that there really isn't a whole lot of time to ponder things or to really go off on a fantasy into some other realm. You're like focused on what's in front of you. And there's something very meditative to me about that kind of focus. Noticing the corn plants as we pass by them in Iowa. And like I said, the smells of the air and how the highway might be undulating and changing, and it really brought me very much into the moment. And I've spent so much of my life being in my head and planning and looking ahead and thinking about things other than what's happening in this moment. So some of the beauty of the motorcycle was it just forced me to be present, feel what my heartbeat is doing, feel what my body feels like while I'm on this bike, feel what the sun feels like and what the air smells like, and just sort of just be there.
Yeah. So you named your motorcycle Izzy.
Yes.
And so why don't you explain for our listeners, like, first of all, why is it a she, and where did you come up with the name Izzy? And I think that's just a fabulous name.
Well, she's a she because I could not imagine her being anything but a she. She felt like an extension of me. It felt like on her I could do things I couldn't do on my own. So she had to be a she for that reason. Izzy, I actually have had two motorcycles named Izzy. The first was, the first was Isadora, which was named for Isadora Duncan, and she was a great dancer and very effusive, and so I nicknamed her Izzy. And then that motorcycle, within the first few months of me owning it, my son crashed it and totaled it. So I ended up getting another motorcycle that was basically identical to the first one, and I named her Isabella. Because there was something about Izzy that there was a bit of edge to it. It wasn't as soft as some other girls' names. I felt like a little like I was channeling a stronger version of me. when I used the name Izzy for her. And the idea of the two of us together was like this superhero duo that we could go out and conquer things, like dealing with the hard things in life that I was having trouble doing just on my own. And together with Izzy, I felt like I could do all kinds of stuff.
Now, I understand when you put on your writing boots, it kind of gave you that extra sense of courage or, just that ability, like, gosh, I'm out there doing this.
Yes.
That feeling of that. And so you kind of answered a little bit, but I could see where that would kind of relate to other areas in your life. I mean, it's almost like the little girl wearing the princess dress all the time,
Right.
Because you put it on and you can conquer the world,
Exactly. It's a little fake it till you make it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
When I put those boots on and a pair of jeans and a leather jacket, I was like, watch out, like I'm coming. and that's not who I normally am. And because I was being challenged in all these personal parts of my life and it was feeling so difficult, I needed to channel some of that energy. And I didn't wear the stuff all the time. I only put it on when I rode. But when I put it on, there was this, I tapped into this sort of backbone of steel that I had that I didn't know I had. And so all it would take is putting that on and I'd be like, oh, that's right. I'm stronger than I think I am. I can do things that are bigger and harder than I think I can. If I mastered that motorcycle, I can walk through these difficult, scary things that I'm having to walk through because I know I did that other thing. So there was something really cool in that process. And to this day, if I put on those motorcycle boots, I get a bit of attitude and it feels like my shoulders start to shimmy a little and I'm like, okay, here we go.
Watch out, world.
Exactly. And as women, how often do we get to do that? As women, so often we don't get to do that. We're the nurturers in the background and we're making sure everyone has pie and coffee and it's not often we get to be the ones to say, watch out and come through,
Well, and I think, and I agree with you 100%. I think women, a lot of times, we get into these roles where we think that we should be a certain thing or look a certain way or do certain things. And we miss out on all this adventure that's just waiting for us,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and so to talk about adventure, so you termed neophiliac in your book. So,
yes. Yeah.
So
yeah.
what, for our listeners, what is that and how does that identify with you?
Neophilia is the desire for new and novel experiences. Neophobia is a fear of new and novel experiences. So as I was looking at the role of risk, I looked into the neuroscience and biology and psychology of risk-taking because when I first came home with the motorcycle, everyone looked at me like I was crazy. And I thought, well, am I? So I started looking into why is this filling a role in my life right now? What does this say about me? What does this say about the role that risk-taking plays? And is there a safe and life-enhancing way to take risk? Because if you talk to psychologists and people who study risk, they're always talking about the bad side of it, the way, gambling or unsafe sex or drunk driving or different things. All that is risk and you shouldn't do it. Well, yes, you shouldn't do those things. But there are risks we can take that are life-affirming, but nobody's studying that because they're all busy studying the way it's bad, So I was looking into that. So that's when I discovered those terms, neophilia and neophobia, and realized that I'm a neophiliac, that there's something for me that I find exciting about something that's new and novel. Now, that something doesn't have to be something physically risky. It can be an emotional risk. It can be a spiritual risk. It can be a creative risk. It could be learning a new language, taking a watercolor class. It could be doing anything that's new and makes us a little afraid because we're not sure that we know how to do it and we might make fools of ourselves and we might fail. That if that gets you excited, where the excitement's maybe just a hair more than the fear is, then you're probably a neophiliac as well.
I probably fall in that category.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of looking back, and gosh, I mean, you've done some amazing activities. I mean, yeah, there's some you talk about like, watercolors and paintings and stuff like that, but I mean, you've been an ice climber and marathon runner. I mean, just things that most people look at and go, gosh, I wish I could do that in my lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was the kind of person that used to sit back and say the same thing and think that wasn't for me. And it wasn't until I learned to ride the motorcycle that I started to challenge those assumptions. And find out, you know what, maybe I'm never going to be the best at these things, but that doesn't mean I can't do them and have fun. And I can do them on whatever level I'm able to do them, and that's legit. I don't have to be like the top dog doing it. And my whole life I had spent thinking unless I could do something well, there was no point in doing it. And even something I really wanted to do, if I wasn't sure I would be good at it right out the gate, I might not even try. And so learning that, you know what, it's okay to not be good at it. If I find joy in it, or if I even think I might find joy in it, let's go have the experience and find out. Let's go explore.
And the worst thing could happen is that you fall in love with it. It's like, hey, ice climbing, I'm actually pretty good at this, and I rock it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why. Go ahead.
I was going to say, for Mother's Day this year, my 3 kids who are now adults, my youngest is 22, we all went rock climbing together on the beach in Malibu. And especially my boys, the 2 older boys, their friends would say, oh, I'm taking my mom to this place for brunch, or we're going to this museum. What are you doing with your mom? And they stood so tall when they said, well, we're actually going rock climbing. And that was really fun.
Well, and it kind of brings me to my next point, because it's so empowering, to be able to step outside the box. And it leads the way for a lot of other women to say, you know what, Mother's Day, I want to go, skydiving, or I maybe want to go horseback riding, or that thing that I've always wanted to do but never had the opportunity to.
Right. And why not? I mean, do all mothers have to, put on hats and go to flower gardens on Mother's Day? And there's nothing wrong with putting on a hat and going to a flower garden. I love that. But it's fun to do things that are unexpected for Mother's Day.
Now, so what other, because you've got these new activities that you've kind of dived into along with riding bikes, what are some of the surprising things that you've learned about yourself through this journey?
Well,
I'm sure there's a lot.
There's a lot. One is I learned I'm really terrified of heights, which makes it interesting that I decided to learn rock climbing and ice climbing. But that just because I have a fear of something doesn't mean I have to let that stop me. When I was scuba diving, I learned that I'm a little claustrophobic. The first few times going down underwater and you look up and you see, 100 feet of water above you, it's kind of like, oh, what am I doing? and that I panic, but that I can talk myself through the panic. And when I get to the other side of the panic, I find amazing things I would have missed out on if I had just given into the panic.
And it's interesting because that's what a great analogy to just work, be able to work through your fears and come out the other side of any situation. So it could be like maybe someone has a hard time with conflict at work or at home, or there are things that they've got to walk through. And when you're able to do that and just kind of breathe through it, I mean, it's such an experience.
It's true. And for me, again, that's why the motorcycle came into play when it did, is I needed the strength and the courage in my personal life, and I didn't have it. But I found I could tap into it in this external, scary motorcycle way and then bring that courage into the personal stuff. And for me, the personal stuff is scarier than anything else. So I think that's why I do a lot of risky things, is to keep reminding myself that I can have that courage in the personal stuff that frightens me.
It probably allows you also to draw on that courage when you need to.
Well, that courage is a muscle. So if I've never used the muscle, I'm not going to know how to access it, and it's not going to be very strong. But if I voluntarily do these things that scare me, I learn how to keep my breathing calm, not freak out, know that the scary part will pass and I'll move on to another thing. And I develop a sense of understanding how I respond when I'm in scary situations. And if I do that enough, when a scary situation comes along that I didn't invite, because life is going to give us that stuff. I have those skills and those that muscle memory to use in those experiences.
I can imagine it also gives you like the bird eye view of like what's important and what isn't in life anymore. Yeah. I know you talk about it. You have an analogy in regards to a piece of clothing. In your book in regards to that. And I found that to be so beautiful, but they have to actually buy the book, Harley and Me. I'm not going to give it away. But I loved that analogy so much because it was like, gosh, what a beautiful place to be in where, you can just be above the small stuff.
Yeah. And when you do physically risky things, you're always asking yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And the worst that could happen is usually you're going to die. And so
I never went that far.
But for a lot of the stuff I do, that is the worst that could happen. It's probably not going to because I'm taking every step possible. But when you're then standing at a position and thinking, I could die, everything else falls into place as to what's important and what isn't. It gives you a very different perspective on life, to recognize your mortality, to know that we all are going to die at some point. And therefore, based on the fact that I could die, what's important to me now? And it changes the lens.
Well, and then and I would think also that you are in a position where it's like, but I've really lived. So whatever has happened, whatever does happen, man, this is a life to write about. Yeah.
And I think as long as we've embraced the idea that we're all going to die, it makes it easier for our lives to get bigger. But when we're so busy holding on to dear life, we're afraid to do anything. Our lives become smaller and more boxed in, and sort of letting go a little and just saying, I'm going to milk this experience for all it's worth.
Yeah, and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, and hopefully not die there's in all the sports I do, all the activities I do, I'm very conscious about safety. I will not get on a motorcycle without every bit of safety gear possible that I can put on. I will not climb without all the safety gear. I've studied how to be safe. I go out of my way to try to exert control over the situation to err on the side of safety. That said, everything is risky, and we have to make peace with that.
Well, and so it leads me, we could talk about this all day long. I just really loved and enjoyed your book, and it's so well written. Yes, it was such a joy to be able to spend the time reading this, and of course this time that we're spending together. What do you have going from here? What's next for you?
Well, you and I were talking that even as far as going to Colorado.
It could be going to Colorado. It could be what's next on your plate.
I'll be speaking in colorado soon on the 24th at the Bold Betties. I'm getting better at ice climbing, and we'll be back in Colorado in Ouray for the ice climbing festival there this coming winter. And I'm working on a novel, which is something new and scary, and just expanding my life in as many ways as possible, looking for new adventures around the next corner.
Well, I can't wait to see your next book, number one.
Thank you.
Because I'm sure it's going to be a page turner as this one was. And, when it is ready to come out, please let us know, because we would love to have you back on the show to share it with us and share your next adventure with us. So Bernadette, where can people go if they want to connect with you and be part of your community and, of course, learn more about Harley and Me?
Great. Well, the book is available everywhere, both in hardback and paperback. My website is Bernadette-Murphy.com, and I'm on Facebook. You can friend me there, and Instagram and Twitter. You can find me, and I'd love to be in contact with anyone.
Oh, well, hey, I so appreciate you taking the time to be on the show with us today. What a joy it's been to spend this time with you. So thank you for being here and sharing your book with us.
Thank you, Marianne. It's so lovely to be with you, and I'm grateful for the time.
We are going to pause here for a quick break, and we will be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1-2-3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Ben Wexler is a gifted leadership development and strategy consultant for professionals who want to transform their organizations and careers. Through a uniquely personalized set of processes, participants discover their unique knowledge, how to leverage that knowledge and experience, and then put it all together with a global strategy. You're more valuable, your organization is more valuable, and the change is viral. Contact Ben at 630-881-1074. 630-881-1074.
This is Jennifer McGill. My highly anticipated new album, Unbreakable, is now available at jennifermcgill.com. Everything from power ballads to high-energy jam-out-in-your-car songs. I used my highest joys and deepest pains to create empowering songs of love, strength, healing, and restoration so that you can be unbreakable too. Get your copy of Unbreakable today from jennifermcgill.com. Because who doesn't want to be unbreakable?
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. Gosh, today is the day of literary geniuses as far as these two authors are concerned. Our next guest is Britt Collins, and she's here today to talk to us about her book, Strays, a lost cat, a homeless man, and their journey across America. So Britt is a British journalist and writes for The Guardian, Sunday Times, The Independent, Harper's Bazaar, Connaught Traveler, and is a contributing editor for Billionaire.com. She has volunteered at sanctuaries around the world, from tending big cats and baboons to wild horses in Nevada. So let's welcome to the show, Britt.
Thank you, Marianne, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Oh, I am just overjoyed to spend this time with you. And your book kind of came along as I was doing some work online, and we talked about that just a little bit ago. And what a fascinating story. How did this story even come into your awareness?
Well, at the time, I was living in Los Angeles with my husband, and he and our cats moved out there in 2012. But of course, I'm back in London. And I just saw the headline, "Homeless Man Travels 3,600 Miles to Take Cat Back Home." And I thought, wow, this is quite extraordinary. It's just a sort of quirky, touching story that appeals to me. And I thought I had to find him. So I did.
Well, and it's quite a journey, too, because to be able to find somebody who doesn't have an address, it must have been quite difficult to kind of locate him.
Well, at the time, this was June 2013, I was working on a story for The Guardian, and I just saw this story, read it, and I immediately contacted his foster father, Walter, in Montana. And shortly after, I contacted the cat's owner, Ron Buss, in Portland. And then Michael called me, and he poured out his heart to me about rescuing the cat and then losing her and traveling with her.
Well, and I know that you kind of set out in writing this book to not just tell the story, but also to see what you could do to help Michael.
Yes, definitely. I wanted to sort of help Michael. I want to help cats. One of the things I want to do with this book is advocate for people to adopt animals rather than buy them, because so many cats and dogs are actually bought from pet shops or online or breeders, and most of those animals come from kitten and puppy mills, and they suffer horrifically. And I guess there's a lot more awareness than there used to be, but even so, people will go after a sort of certain pedigreed animal, and it's much more rewarding to actually save one from the street. Or literally, the shelters are putting down nearly 7 million animals a year in America, and I can't imagine what it's like on a global scale.
It's just, it's a really tough number. I mean, I rescued my dog, and there's always that saying, like, who rescued who, and it kind of goes along with your book as well, because it seems like when Michael picked up this injured and thin cat, he didn't really realize the impact it was going to have on him personally.
Well, as Michael said, and as you probably saw from the book, he's always been an animal lover, and he's had rescued cats and dogs in the past. And as he said to me, he saw her there cowering from the rain, injured, thin, and he said something just told him to pick her up. And he later realized that he was meant to save her, to take her back home to Ron Buss, her owner, who never stopped looking for her in the 10 months that she was having a grand journey across America with Michael.
She's quite the adventurer, because I understand she would perch on his back.
Well, Ron saved them. Ron saved Mara and Crito when they were 2 weeks old. They were orphans dumped beneath a neighbor's porch. And he basically brought these 5 kittens back to life and gave them the life that they were denied, or they would have been denied, whoever dumped them beneath that porch. Mm-hmm. And he found homes for 3 of them, and he decided to raise Mara and Credo like children, giving them enriching experiences, taking them everywhere. So Michael wasn't aware that this cat was already used to traveling when she sat in his backpack, and he actually taught her to walk on a leash. But Ron used to take her to work and to friends' houses and to the beach and just everywhere. And but now apparently she's a couch cat. She doesn't like to go out anymore, and he doesn't allow them to go out because, as you know, he's lost them twice.
She probably figures after the last road trip she's good, because that was 3,600 miles with Michael.
Well, Michael said it was actually over 4,000, 5 states, 4,000 miles, surviving bears and coyotes and all sorts of predators.
Yeah, I understand he traveled the West Coast, and they even came across a bear in Yosemite.
Yeah, they came across a bear in Yosemite. They came across a bear in Montana. They survived a cattle stampede when they were camping in Montana when he was en route to his foster father's house. So they've had quite a few harrowing scrapes.
Well, and I understand too, I mean, because he named the cat Tabor after this cafe that he found the cat at. And I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry. He just glanced at the restaurant and he thought, well, I'm going to call her Tabor. So whether she's a male or a female, it fits.
Mm-hmm. It's an easy name and kind of an appropriate name. And I found it very interesting. You hear about this quite often when people are homeless and they have pets. They take care of their pets better than they take care of themselves. And how Tabor, when they finally got to the point where Tabor was taken to the vet, the cat was a little bit of a chunky monkey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the vet apparently said that she was a pristine cat, apart from her teeth needing a bit cleaning. But Michael thought, well, since they live outdoors, the little extra weight wouldn't hurt her. And no, it's quite touching the lengths he went for her, really, when he had nothing.
Now, how did you, when you listened to Michael and he told you his story, because I know that there's just a fabulous video, a book trailer that goes with this. How was it that you were able to get that kind of footage? Was it that you had your team go out and do it afterwards, or was it kind of during all this time when this was happening?
Actually, it was 2 weeks after Michael brought her back home to Ran, and to her brother. Her brother, Crito, by the way, sat on the porch every night waiting for his sister, and he was a nervous wreck and stripped his fur, and he was just deeply depressed the entire 10 months that she was gone. But no, 2 weeks after he brought her back home, we went, my husband and I, who's a filmmaker, we're no longer together, but at the time, we went and filmed them. And it literally was fresh. It happened within those sort of 10 days of the cat coming back home.
Yeah, you can see, there are parts of your book that, it's so well written. I just cried because it's just so heart-wrenching, especially when he's getting to the point where, he's, giving Tabor back. That was just, oh my gosh, that's hard.
Well, it's quite funny that you say that, because it went on the Dodo, the animal website, this weekend, and it's had millions of views and thousands of comments. And one of the things that a lot of people found upsetting is that he returned the cat to Ran. They couldn't understand why he couldn't keep her. But Ran offered Michael to sort of to take him to shelters to find another cat. I offered to take him to the shelter, but he said, I'm done with cats. And also, it's how do you give an animal to someone that you've raised from a 2-week-old orphan and their family? You can't just give them away, And she's safe at home. And Michael realized that although he looked after her really well and gave her a lovely, adventurous life, that ultimately she was best being an indoor cat.
It sounds like that's where she really wants to be. And the thing is it would be so easy for some people to say, oh, let's just keep it. But deep down, the right thing to do would be to return the animal, especially in a situation where, it's not like Ron was dumping her or anything like that. He really was looking for his cat.
No, he was having a nervous breakdown, and he was heartbroken the entire 10 months she was gone. And on top of that, the point that a lot of people are missing is that she had a sibling. She had a sibling that was a nervous wreck the entire time she was gone. So I guess whatever sort of situation is, it's whether it's a dog, cat, or you just have to do what's right. It's different if the owner is negligent. And I've actually literally taken a cat from a neighbor who refused to have him neutered, and he was beating up all the cats in the neighborhood, and he cost me thousands of pounds in vet bills, and she just refused to have him neutered, and I was planning to kidnap him, take him to the vet and rehome him. But as I was walking to the shops for the papers, she said to me, my husband's become allergic to Charlie. Can you help me rehome him? And I'm pretty sure that cat was responsible for dozens of strays that I rescued in the neighborhood, because, a young fighting male just kept breeding. Well,
and that's kind of a really tough situation, and I get it. When I'm sure anyone can kind of think back, or maybe they've seen an animal not treated quite as well. People do want to step in and try to provide a better situation for the animal, because it's it just is something that from a heart sense you would want to do. Now, gosh, I mean, this story was just so amazing. There was a point, and you did such a beautiful job writing it. I mean, it was so well written. There's a point in the story where Tabor saves Michael's life. Why don't you explain that a little bit about the sleeping bag?
Oh, yes. I think they were actually by the Sacramento River in Mount Shasta. Mm-hmm. And they were drinking that night. And his two friends passed out cold, and Michael was sleepless. And so he crawled into a sleeping bag because he was freezing and didn't mean to fall asleep, but he did before the fire burnt out. And he woke up with Tabor yowling in her basket. He actually had a hard carrier for her so that, well, she couldn't very well sleep in the wilderness in a sleeping bag. She would be nicked by coyotes or anything, or she would disappear. So he would sort of like wrap her up and put her in her hard carrier before he went to sleep. And he woke up with her yowling and screaming. His bag was on fire and it burnt up to his knees. Mm. So, in a sense, she did save his life because he could have burned to death.
Now, wasn't that kind of a turning point for Michael in one part of his journey?
Well, he thought, because he was on his way back to Portland after spending the winter in California, his friends picked him up and they were all driving. They were doing this sort of coastal camping and decided to go back to Portland for the summer. And he decided after waking up the next morning that he was going to stop drinking for the home stretch back to Portland. And he tried. He drank less the entire time that he had the cat because his big fear was that Mara, or Tabor as he called her, would be taken away from him.
Well, and I think what a lot of people, first off, alcoholism is a really tough disease for people to beat. A lot of times they need help, and obviously being in some of the situations that he's in with people who are actively drinking isn't really the best environment for someone who's looking to stop. But most people don't realize, Michael was a very successful chef that had a heartbreak.
Oh, yes, he had a really lovely life back in St. Louis. He was a chef at a fancy restaurant, and his partner became ill and died of HIV. And Michael decided, he said to me once, being on the street was sort of a geographical cure. Because it not only did he lose his partner in a terrible way, and he didn't expect to walk into homelessness, but he met a community of other drifters out there and just adapted to their way of life. He found a sense of community that perhaps he was lacking after he lost his partner. And but not only that, he had a really troubled childhood. He kept running away from home from the age of 12. So I think for him, running away was always the sort of solution to an unhappy situation.
Yeah, he felt at least it would give him some kind of peace, and it was what he was used to.
I think that's what he was searching for, peace of mind. And he said he really loves sort of being in the wilderness and among the trees, and he thinks of himself as a traveler rather than a homeless person.
Oh, that's easy to see because he definitely has, just within that short period of time for the book, he covered some amazing territory. He's used to kind of getting up and moving from one state to another, and it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, no, it's quite a feat that he protected and looked after that cat in 10 months while traveling thousands of miles and hitchhiking and protecting her from cars, from wild animals. Really quite extraordinary.
It really took him a lot to be able to, especially when he had that turning point with the sleeping bag burning up, to say, gosh, I need to make some changes, because it seemed like he realized at that point how much that Tabor really depended on him, and he had another sense of he actually had like something to live for. There was a sense of responsibility.
Yes, I suppose that the cat definitely gave him she was a warm and constant presence and gave him a purpose, somebody to care for. His foster father, Walter, said that Michael craves that, looking after someone else. And I mean, he's always helped Walter when they were living together. Walter took him in when he was a runaway teenager. Michael, the second or third time he ran away from home, he went to Montana. He loved the sort of open spaces in the wilderness, and he got himself a job as a milk delivery man and a place to live. He enrolled in the local high school until the authorities found out that he was underage and said that he couldn't stay in Montana. And he went back home, but he was miserable, and he decided to go back to Montana and went to Alcoholics Anonymous and found Walter, who's been a constant presence in his life for, well, over 3 decades.
Mm-hmm. Has been that kind of rock for him that it sounds like no matter what's going on, going to visit Walter is kind of one of the places that he can kind of hang his hat for a little bit.
Well, Walter is a very wise, grounded man. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was a drinker himself, and when he met Michael, he'd actually been sober for 6 or 7 years. So he's been sober for several decades. And one of the things he said to me while I was visiting him in Montana, and I asked Michael if he was ever going to sort of quit drinking, mm-hmm. He said that one of the priests that he knew, a good friend of his, said some of us will never sort of reach sobriety in this lifetime. And, that might be the case for some people. So, and the other thing is there are a lot of people who hold down powerful jobs or have great positions of responsibility, and they're functional alcoholics. They don't realize it. So,
yeah, it's just an interesting path how that will be. At least, he's got Walter as well that's there for him should he feels like he needs to have that human connection because he loves being, in nature so much and kind of in the vastness of everything.
I think Walter has spent sort of years trying to convince him to move to Montana, to retire there eventually. But in fact, Michael said Portland Social Services tried to home him too, but he's happy outside. I mean, I remember a similar situation in London. There was an elderly woman who just lived at the bus stop. She was quite old, in her 80s. And it gets very cold in London, not as cold as New York, but pretty cold. Mm-hmm. I remember calling Camden Council saying, why doesn't anybody help this elderly lady at the bus stop? Why? They said, everybody calls about her. They've tried to home her. They've given her sort of several homes. They've done a mental health assessment. She wants to be outside. She wants to be out in the world. And they can't sort of chain her to the radiator or make her stay inside if she doesn't want to, which I suppose, a home is not really everything. It's the sort of sense of community that you find.
And maybe some people find it to be very lonely because when you're out, and if you're in a city landscape, you're among other people, even though you might be alone, No,
absolutely. And that's the sort of situation with Michael and with this elderly lady I was telling you about years ago. I mean, everybody tried to help her, but she didn't want it. So
during the entire time that you're learning of this story and researching it and talking to Michael and Walter and Ron, what were some of the surprising things that you learned?
I have a newfound respect for homeless people because I suppose they are largely invisible to most people. Most people walk by and not notice them, and that happened to Michael and his friends. He spent all summer panhandling, and these same people who walked by him every day suddenly wanted to help him when they saw him with a cat. And I'm afraid I'm one of those people who's guilty. In London, we have something called big issue sellers. So they sell a magazine and they make some of the sort of proceeds from it. And I used to buy the big issue from this man called Tom for like 2 or 3 years. I'd buy him food for himself and his dog, and I'd give him money as well as buying the big issue. And then one day, 2 years later, I saw his dog with someone else, and I asked, well, where's Tom? And he told me they died of he died of an overdose. He was a heroin addict. I didn't realize it all this time. But my point is, I always stop to help homeless people with animals, whereas others, I'll walk by them. And it's a triage situation. You can't help everyone. And you think, well, if they have the added responsibility of having an animal, and anyone who helps and rescues animals just touches my heart, because I've rescued animals my entire life, since I was a child. I mean, I'll do anything for a cat or a dog or a bird. I can't help myself. And so,
I get that. I brought a St. Bernard home one time, so I get it.
Oh, I mean, I've missed flights. I've missed flights going to New York or elsewhere because I had to rescue a magpie, or it's just, I'll drop everything if there's an animal who needs me. I've been late to work helping sort of a stray dog. But mostly I rescue cats in London. I've rescued thousands. Well, not thousands. I should say hundreds.
It can feel like thousands, though.
It feels like thousands because I always had 7 or 8 at any one time of my own, and I constantly fostered for the last 20 years. And everybody just saw me as a cat lady, really, since I was a teenager. Or they would dump cats and kittens on my doorstep in boxes, or I would be the go-to with neighbors and colleagues. Can you help me rehome this cat, or help me capture the stray? And of course, no matter how hectic my life was, I would just drop everything and do it. And I suppose I'll always be a cat lady. It's a bit sort of demeaning, being called a crazy cat lady, because I don't think of myself that way, because I think rescuing and saving lives there's nothing mad about that at all.
I actually think it's quite heroic. So, I mean, if someone called me a mad cat lady, I would take that with pleasure. So I'd say, yeah, bring it on.
But there are some people who they just think, oh God, she's out with the fairies, she's a mad cat lady. But really, I can't turn down an animal in need. And I think it's our responsibility to help anybody who crosses our path if we're able. I mean, I went to Cuba about 12 years ago, and I'd never been to Havana or Cuba. And I spent our entire 10-day trip, I went with a friend, rescuing this kitten that we named Francesca. We fixed her broken legs. First, I thought it was a little rat. She was on her own in the doorway, and she looked really scrappy and poorly. And we looked around to see if there was a mother, and when there wasn't, I stuck her in my pocket, took her to the hotel, fed her, and then when she was eating, I realized she had a broken leg. So I had her leg fixed, I found her a home. I mean, the entire trip about was saving Francesca and feeding the stray cats and dogs I saw on the street. I mean, that's what I really hate about traveling. When you go to countries where the streets are full of strays, it is just heartbreaking.
Well, and yeah, I can see why Michael's story and Tabor's story and Ron's story appeal to you so much, because you have such a big heart when it comes to animals, and the human side of it as well, or just the impact and the love that this cat gave so many people, and how Michael falling basically in love with an animal allowed him to just kind of love again, Well, I mean, I completely empathize with both of them. I completely understood. I mean, for me, I've always loved animals, and especially cats. I mean, to me, there's vital oxygen. I was rescuing stray cats, injured squirrels, birds, and I became a vegetarian as a kid. I started out as a music journalist in the 90s, and I moved in circles where most musicians were vegans, and inevitably I became one myself 20 years ago. And I was an activist throughout the 90s and helped shut down a lot of places that bred animals for laboratories. And I've had death threats from fur traders, and I've had phone taps for years. And I think a life with no purpose is not a life at all. I would agree with you on that. So I have to ask you, are you still in touch with Michael? Is he kind of still connecting with you? And if so, how is he doing?
Yes, I am. I mean, he's still traveling. I'm also in touch with his father and Ron as well. Mm-hmm. In fact, Walter sent me a really lovely message, how much he loved the book. And right after he read it, he said that I did an outstanding job and that I nailed all the conversations. And he really loved that I caught the tenderness of Michael perfectly. So it was really it meant a lot to get that from him, because Walter is a sort of no-nonsense military guy, so to get a compliment like that was quite thrilling.
Huge. Yeah,
huge. And Ron is really happy, and he's been promoting it on Facebook, and he's friends with this band called Ministry. They were a big sort of industrial band in the 90s. They were multi-platinum. They sold millions of records. And one of the guys, the frontman's wife, has been promoting it on her Facebook because they're in it, and they run a shelter in, I think, El Paso, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice how everybody's sort of actively promoting it.
And again, I mean, and it's definitely making big waves. So it's easy to see why people are just having this connection with Michael's story in your book because of just how well it's written and just the story itself. I mean, it's just, it really touches your heart and has you wish for more, you know.
Well, that's really kind of you to say. But I think with animals cross the demographics. You don't have to sort of share the same language, have the same background, or be the same age, or either you love animals or you don't, you know, so.
Yeah. Well, so what's next for you? I mean, gosh, you're an amazing writer. What's next on your plate?
That's thank you. That's really kind. Because, you know, when you're, it's very lonely being a writer, and you never realize what you're doing is that great, or I don't know. Well, I'm launching a cat festival in London next summer. It's something I always wanted to do. When I lived in LA, CatCon happened, and I thought, oh God, I've had that idea sort of for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And since I moved back to London, I thought, well, I think Europe definitely needs a cat festival. So we're launching it on June 2nd in London at a place called the Oval Space. So we'll have all the sort of like wonderful, hard to find, buzzworthy cat stuff for cats and the people who adore them, and we'll have speakers and cat films and vegetarian food, cat-inspired cocktails. So that's what I'm doing. And but I also want to finally do a book that I wrote on Nirvana straight out of university in the 90s, which I guess it was a controversial book that was sort of banned. But we had death threats from Kurt and Courtney because it was during the time when they were taking a lot of heroin and their child was taken away. And so I think Victoria and I definitely want to put that book out, and the story needs to be told, really.
Well, you're definitely the person to do it. I mean, you have a knack with bringing amazing stories to life and adding such beautiful heart to it. You know, we'll definitely have you back on the show when your next book is out, without a doubt.
Thank you, Marianne. That's really, really kind.
Well, you know, and so, Britt, I would be remiss if I didn't ask, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Well, I'm everywhere. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. They could also reach me on my website, which is Britt Collins, Britt Collins, COLLINS.net.
Well, you know, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us on the show today, Britt. We so greatly appreciate it, and just what an inspiration you are. I so appreciate this time we've been able to spend together today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's the end of our time today. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.